we'll get started here. Now, rather than, having two different little tiny sessions on these big goals and then the self-paced learning environments, I thought it was a kind of a good idea to put the two together because they really do kind of go hand in hand. Goal setting with students really helps, especially if they are going to be working on something self-paced. So, with a lot of things in education, there's a whole continuum here. You can not implement these things at all, or you can do this to an extreme level. And I'm just going to go through and give some general ideas and some examples, and then, just try to think about how it might work in your classroom as it currently is, just with some minor modifications if it's something that you think would help. And then, just like with anything, if you have questions, comments, just throw them out there whenever they come up. All right. So the idea of goal setting, for teachers and students is really important. All right. That idea of giving you a long-term vision of what it is you want to accomplish, but also there's short-term, the short-term motivation of what you're going to do today, tomorrow, a week to get to that long-term goal. For us as teachers, everything we do is goal-driven, just trying to get to, through one more year, how we do that, how we design that, what we want the students to learn. We set those goals for ourselves, for what we want to accomplish. And for the students too, is something that, sometimes kind of gets overlooked or might get overlooked with, trying to get through content, trying to cover everything we need to cover. And again, there's varying degrees for the goal setting part for students, but there's some things we can do to kind of help them along the way, with that idea of, a long-term vision for what it is we want to accomplish in a year, and kind of motivating them along the way with these short-term like checkpoints and things to accomplish that goal. So you may have heard this acronym before for SMART goals, and just an acronym. So they want the goals to be specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. That's what SMART stands for. And this is one that's really popular. I was at a training a little while ago where we had to write goals for schools, dioceses, and that kind of stuff. And the state even wanted SMART goals. Like that's how they wanted them written in that format. And it's really no different than when we write learning goals or objectives for a lesson. All right, we want something that's specific, a goal that's direct, focused, and meaningful, something that we can measure so that we can track progress, so that we can make sure that we meet that goal, something that is attainable and realistic, and then relevant, and then timely, that it has a deadline, that you're not just saying that you want to do something at some point, that you're actually giving yourself clear deadlines. So an example of a badly or poorly written goal, something like, I want to make much more time each morning to work on my most important task. So it's not really timely, it doesn't really give a deadline. And as teachers, things come up in the morning, right? Like something like that might not be the best for a goal, because things are going to happen. Things are going to interfere with that, and it might be tough to actually achieve that. It might not be attainable. So something like this would be much more specific. So every day this week, I will work on our new website redesign from 8:30 to 10:30 without interruption. So you have a specific time. So it's just for this week. It's a short time limit. A deadline. You have a time limit, 8:30 to 10:30, that you set that time aside.
Good luck with that without interruption. That's
right,
really
yeah.
optimistic there, Brian.
So, those ideas of just how you lay out the goal can really help you achieve it as well. So how do we take this then and kind of translate it into the classroom? How do we help students with this? So one way is including them in what the lesson objective is. So a lot of times we write out the lesson objective, we look at our Bloom's taxonomy, and we come up with a good verb and that kind of stuff, and we put it in the lesson, and it sits there. But we took time to actually plan what that objective was going to be, and there is a purpose to it. So, sometimes you might hear suggestions of, have it posted on the board or let the students know what it is. And it does make a difference. And that was something that I had started to do with my own class, where, they would have some kind of warm-up question or a bell ringer. They would come in and they would work on that. And then I would, go through homework check, whatever it might be, take an attendance in the morning. And then once I got through all that stuff, we go over the warm-up question, which usually somehow tied into what we were going to do that day. And then I would share the lesson objective with them. Okay, today we're going to do this. And I didn't go through, the official Bloom's taxonomy phrasing of it, but just to give them an idea. And I would have it like on one single slide after my warm-up question, just go, from one to the next. And just to kind of give them an idea of, okay, you're trapped with me here for the next 45 minutes. This is what we're going to do together. And for them, like, that kind of sets an expectation of, okay, this is what I'm going to do today. The next 45 minutes are going to be valuable, and kind of gives them that heads up. Another way we can do that too is breaking down larger projects into smaller tasks or checkpoints. A lot of times we give students a big project, and then, we all kind of chuckle about the students who let it go to the last minute, right? We see that all the time. But, kind of given those checkpoints and that time for feedback, where they have to meet those specific deadlines, that might be a way, if you're giving like a larger, like a research paper or something like that, that the students can kind of break that down and help them make the project a lot more manageable, having those checkpoints and those deadlines to meet. And then some other strategies, things for organization and helping students with time management, posting homework and announcements. And again, a lot of us do this already. Usually we have a board dedicated to that, where it's always written. So if you have the opportunity to do both the verbal and the visual, setting aside that time of the first 5 minutes or the last 5 minutes, and not, shouting at them as they're running out the door, oh, by the way, this is your homework for tonight, to kind of have that posted, and, checklists and planners. And really, for our kids, by this point, high school students, they have some experience with this, but some of them might need the reminders, and that structured time, having the first couple minutes, everybody take out your planner, or if they're using their iPad for it or something like that, and write down your homework, and just kind of get everybody on the same page before you move on to the next thing, could be really beneficial. And then that's something that you can kind of structure and remove those supports. So as the year goes on, maybe you don't need to remind everybody, but to start the year off, that might not be a bad a little thing to do. And then the course outlines and syllabus, and this is someday going to be my goal. I don't know how realistic it really is with schedule changes and things that happen, but almost like the idea of the college syllabus, where you kind of have an idea of what all your assignments are going to be and approximately when they're going to take place, to kind of have that long-term picture of what's going to get done in the year. And, I have a general idea, but we all know how schedules change and things come up. So one day maybe, but, and a lot of these things can transfer into the digital classroom too. If, maybe you're experiencing like a blended or online kind of learning model, sharing the objectives. Maybe it's a weekly objective instead of a daily objective if you're online and not totally face-to-face. So kind of having that somewhere, and, breaking things down into smaller tasks. So when we went online, the last 2 months of the year, that task list kind of incorporated these two things where, you might have your objective for the week up at the top, and then in that chart, you kind of broke down everything that week into smaller tasks, usually organized, from top to bottom in order that they would occur. The idea of posting homework and announcements, for online, the biggest thing with that is just the consistency of the location. So the students know where to look for it. And, if it's all in the same place for every one of their teachers, that's great. But as long as they know where to look for it, for each individual teacher, and it's consistent week after week for that teacher, over time that'll be a much easier process for them. So maybe it's having, the top section of Sapphire, like you have your name and your information at the very top, and then maybe you create a section below that that's just homework, and then every day you put a little announcement, or once a week you put a little announcement in there that is just the homework assignments for that week, and then you have all your other materials and stuff organized in sections underneath that. That might be a way to do that too. Okay. Any questions or comments on any of that?
No.
Okay. All right. And then to kind of go along with that is, with the checklists and the, checking in and having those deadlines, revision is something that really helps students as well. Being able to give and receive feedback from a peer or from their teacher. And that's really where the learning process occurs, where students have the ability to see what they did wrong, tweak it and turn it back in. And, not in a way to fluff up grades or anything like that, but like to actually, for the students to actually, see what they did wrong. How many times have we, gone through a test with students and just to give them that opportunity to look at the incorrect questions, go through what the correct answers are, because that is where the learning really occurs. So with other projects, with other assignments, that is a way that we can help with that learning and with setting and achieving goals. So, giving critical feedback and receiving critical feedback, this isn't something that students inherently, or people really even inherently know how to do. It's something that you have to learn. So as a teacher, that idea of setting expectations is important. Otherwise, you're going to get students who, comment on their friend's work and says, "Good job, I liked it," and that's not really going to be helpful for the growth or improvement or anything like that. So, kind of going through and showing examples of what critical feedback looks like and how to respond to it and that kind of thing can be very helpful. And there's different ways to do it. So, the peer-to-peer critique is what we think of very often, where, you might partner students up in partners or a table of 4 or something like that, and have them kind of go around and maybe review each other's essays or, somehow work collaboratively that way. But another option would be just for them to observe a high quality work. And, that's something that we do sometimes, whether it's a, past student who turned in a really good paper and then you keep a copy of it to show students like, this is what I'm expecting. Or maybe you just do like a quick example to just kind of show the students what it is that you're expecting to see from them. So, that in a way is a kind of feedback as well. And then self-assessment. So for this one, I meant more of just students assessing their progress, not so much giving themselves a grade, but to really like look and, to look at their work and to look at a list of criteria. Maybe it's a rubric or something like that, and to really just kind of sit down and go piece by piece, either through a checklist or through a rubric or something, and really honestly evaluate how they did and how they could improve. So that whole process of draft and revision is or can be very helpful. Now, this is something that does take up a lot of time. Anything where you're reworking and that kind of stuff. But in a way, it is real life. Any job or anything like that, a lot of times you're not going to get it right the first time. You're going to get input from other people to go back and fix things and do it again. And over time, you're going to get quicker at it. But especially in the beginning, this is something that can take some time to set up those expectations, to kind of model for students how to do this. And then if it's something that's consistent over time, becomes a habit and can be a lot easier for the students to transition to. Okay. Any questions, comments there? All right, so then that takes us to this concept of self-paced learning. This idea that the student is able to control the amount of material they consume or the order of the material, as well as the duration of time they need to learn the new information. And again, this is one of those things that is not necessarily a new concept. It's definitely something that's a lot easier to do with classroom technology. That students are kind of able to go out and access a lot of things and spend as much time as they need, rewatching video or something like that. And this is also one of those things that has extremes. You can do this to a very high degree, where students are totally immersed. One of the examples that I'll give is even at LCTI, with a lot of the kids in those tech programs. I went over to observe one of the, not really computer science, but, it's a certification-based program. And the students there, they have a workbook and they're almost entirely, it's up to them how much time they spend on something, how quickly they move from one task to the next. And they just have basically a task list that they have to complete. And, when I went in, the teacher had like a big flat screen monitor up on the board, and it had all the students listed and where they, what their goal was for the week, where they were at with their work, which for, the standard classroom, even for me, like that concept is a little frightening to think about students all over the place with where they are. So again, this is the kind of thing to think about how it works for you and for your classroom, because that time management piece in a typical classroom is very tough with a self-paced learning environment. And for teachers, that's a major, major shift in their classes. But we do acknowledge that students learn differently and they learn at different rates. So, how can we kind of have the best of both worlds? That's kind of what I'm getting at here. So it might look like, these learning activities being carefully designed to address specific objectives, and the students, kind of work through these units or these modules that you would kind of pre-design. This is kind of what it looks like at LCTI for that class that I observed. The activities that students do are carefully selected. They meet those learning goals. So for LCTI, those kids had to, the state has their own set of requirements, kind of like how the state has standards for public schools. They have requirements that those students to pass that course meet a checklist of certain things. And, all the activities that they do, they have the workbook that they use, a couple different workbooks as they move through unit to unit. And all those activities are based on the task list, the checklist of skills that they need to have by the time they graduate. And then, as the students go through step by step, their progress is checked by their teacher. So the teacher really is, to the extreme degree of a facilitator in this role, where, they just kind of monitor the students, they check in when they need help. And then as the student goes from one task to the next, the teacher checks just to make sure that they mastered, that they got that step before they go on to the next one. And then what's nice is if the student doesn't achieve the goal, if they don't learn what they need to learn, or if they can't do what they need to do, they can go back, they can review it, they can try again, and just that constant feedback, trial, or, to keep trying again, is available. So challenges for something like that. One of the top ones is just that there might be a lack of interaction between the instructor and the students, because the students are really doing a lot on their own. The teacher may introduce some basic concepts to the whole group or something like that. But then the students are really kind of on their own. And at that point, the teacher's really only popping in, maybe if they have difficulty or something. So that is usually noted as a negative. Teachers especially have a tough time with that. The idea of this single path lockstep method, if students can only do task A before they do task B, before they do task C in that specific order, that the environment can kind of become monotonous if they don't have choice to kind of branch out and do things that interest them a little bit. Definitely the lack of self-discipline and procrastination that is, typical maybe of teenagers, can kind of delay them completing any of those requirements or kind of letting things go to the last minute. So trying to keep them on task can be a challenge. And then definitely a lot more preparation, because these things have to be ready to run essentially when the students come into the classroom, because now that they're working at their own pace, they might be working faster than you expected and might be 2 weeks ahead. So to kind of have all that stuff developed ahead of time, maybe not the full year, but at least, a month or two ahead, can be a major challenge and a big time sink too. So all those limitations, challenges, why bother doing it? Well, there's a couple different methods, a couple different ways that we can use this, even in a standard classroom. Again, I never really promote doing anything too much one way or the other, just to kind of find a happy medium or middle ground between everything. And if we're talking self-paced learning environment, that could be totally online. It could be totally in the building. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can even be blended. But just that idea that the students are kind of working at their own pace a little bit, maybe on a project or a unit or a section, that might be a way to kind of incorporate some things. So one way to think about it is what they call the 5 E's instructional model, where instead of like your typical, like the 3-part lesson planning structure that's taught in colleges, where you have like the set or the opener, the developmental, which is like the bulk of your lesson, and then close, where you wrap things up at the end. The same basic idea, but this is a 5-step where you start with the engage. So now you're trying to engage the students in what material will be learned. So it might be a brainstorming activity. You might ask them some questions, kind of like a warm-up or a bell ringer, some way to access that prior knowledge. And then once they're kind of engaged in what it is they're supposed to be learning, now they go out and explore. So you might say, okay, I want you to go out and read this article or research some reasons why something occurs, watch this video, something like that, where you kind of direct them to what they're going to look at, or maybe even just, find 2 articles or find a video about, whatever the topic is. And then after that, explain. So this would be like the typical teaching time, could be just live synchronous teaching, explaining what it is, kind of elaborating on what students did in this explore piece. And, here in the middle, this is kind of your check-in point. So now they've done these 2 things kind of on their own. So now this is your opportunity to kind of check in and make sure that students are A, on task and where they need to be, and B, making sure that they understand what it is that they're doing and they're reading. And then once we get through that, elaborate is where the students actually, go out and make connections and apply what it is they learned up here. So, maybe they have to write something or create something, or this is the part where they're really doing and creating something. And then the evaluation at the end is just how do we make sure that they learn what it is we want them to learn. So not a, totally earth-shattering idea, but the way it's organized, and I'll show you how a couple examples of what that looks like in a second. And like I said, the tech tools can kind of help with this, things like Google Classroom for a lot of reasons, but, they have questioning where students reply to posts and things like that. Mentimeter and Poll Everywhere are very quick polling tools where you can ask just a simple question and get students either to put an open-ended response or multiple choice and just kind of choose from the poll. For exploring things like Google search, you could provide YouTube videos, even discussion boards would be an option there. And then for the explaining piece, obviously, if you're in front of them, you know, that takes care of itself. But then other tools like Zoom or Screencast are ways that you can connect with video. Edpuzzle's a neat little tool where you can take a video from YouTube or Khan Academy or a bunch of other sources and actually insert questions along the way. And the students can't speed up or, you know, skip ahead in the video. So, and then it gives you data on how the students did on each of those questions. And you can even combine this with one of these other tools. You could create your own video and then pop it into Edpuzzle and have your own questions about your own video that the students can't fast forward through. So it's a neat little tool. And then, you know, some other tools for the evaluation, things like quizzes and Google Forms and Kahoot. There's online, Socrative too is an online quiz tool. You know, Quizlet would be another one where students could create flashcards and things like that. So there's a lot of things that are out there, but let's take a look at some examples. So, so these are templates, and I'm going to share the slideshow at the end. So if there's anything that you want, you can actually like open these and make a copy of them and use them, modify them, whatever you want. But this actually takes the 5 E's and breaks them down into, like, for the students, this would be their tasks. So you might have the, you know, title of the unit or the lesson or whatever it is, the date, and then, you know, this is the first thing. So, you know, might have a prompt, like a question, and you want them, you know, go to Google Classroom and answer this question in the discussion board or something like that. So this is for the students. Remember, if we're doing self-directed, this is like their home base. This is a place where they can go and they can see everything they need to do. And, you know, the way that as humans we interpret this is to go from top to bottom. So they're going to kind of move through one to the next to the next.
Right, as a good two good fits for this would be like HyperDocs or Nearpod, right? Because you could, in effect, since they are working at their own pace, you set it up where they could go to other things, but this one is sort of a linear outline. This one is, but with HyperDocs, they could skip around if they want to, correct?
They could, and you could even turn this into, you know, maybe not a full HyperDoc with
Right.
and video and stuff embedded, but you might have links, like you might write something like go to
This YouTube video or whatever. Right.
and then you would like insert the link here and they would just click it to take them to the video. So you could definitely do something like that to kind of help them along the way. You know, so that would be one way. And then, you know, this one's modified a little bit, where they change the E's, but the idea is basically the same, where they apply. This one added a share piece.
Yeah, that's like a HyperDoc model right there. I've seen those like that.
Yep. And then here with the share, you know, this is trying to get students to collaborate a little bit, and then they actually add a reflection piece for the students to kind of go back and reflect. That idea of feedback and self-evaluation can be really important. And then they even added an extend. So, you know, for your students who are done really quick, rather than just moving on to the next thing, you might give them some extra information or like a video or an article or something like that that they might be interested in. You know, if they're done, they can do that, read that, or watch that, or, you know, maybe an interactive, something like that. And then this is more of a simplified format, same idea, but this one is just a 3-part explore, explain, and apply, with, you know, some examples here of what you could put in each one. So again, a lot of this depends on your classroom, what works, and, you know, if any of these appeal to you. And then, you know, you'll have this link too, but there's also sample ones for different subjects, so you can see what other teachers do who have posted things online, just to maybe give some ideas. Okay, So for other options, other ways to think about this, students self-paced learning thing, learning stations is always a popular one where you have different stations set up around the classroom and students kind of move from one to the next. And we actually have now learning stations in social distance format. So somebody came up with an idea. So I linked it in here. Caitlin Tucker's pretty good with different things. I follow her on Twitter and she's got some great ideas, but she came up with an idea to kind of how to do the station rotation model, but without really rotating and, kind of keeping the students at a socially safe distance given the current climate. So I'll leave that there if anybody's interested. That I thought that was kind of interesting. Different things we got to think about for the fall. But the idea of just general learning stations of kind of getting the students exposed to those different it might be something that has a lot of content in it. It might be something that's really easy to divide up. And this is something that you can do a mix of online work, offline work. The teacher can even be a station. So, that idea of the 5 E's, the explain piece, you might float from one group or one table to the next and you just, do your little spiel, little 10-minute mini lecture or whatever it is to explain and to check in. So you can even be part of the station as well. Things like unit pacing guides or checklists or task sheets with deadlines for the students, which we've mentioned already. Those are the kinds of things that if students are working at their own pace, we still want to hold them accountable for deadlines and due dates so that, like we said, they don't wait until the very last minute to get things done. So the idea of a task list or a checklist can be very helpful with that as well, and kind of helps the students break down those steps, especially if something's a bigger assignment or a bigger project. Flipped instruction could be another way to do things where, the students watch the video, and we always say the benefit for this one is at their own pace. So if a student needs to go back and rewatch something, I remember like lab prep for me was always a big thing because before lab day, when I was in high school, we wanted to get the full 45 minutes in for lab because we only had one day out of a 6-day cycle to do our labs. So we would have to go home and read the lab book ahead of time so that we knew what we were doing for that period. So that even, just that idea of just watching a video or reading something, doing your homework before you come to school so that you're prepared. And then when they get to school, it's more of this hands-on practice. And that tends to be, if there is any kind of hands-on practice, that tends to be something that students do at their own pace because some are going to work quicker than others. Inquiry-based learning is definitely something that students kind of work at their own pace. So this is where you provide a question or a prompt and they have to go out and kind of research and look at those ideas on their own or maybe with a partner or a small group. This isn't specifically self-paced because there are time limits, but Start Soul is available. If anybody did that training with me, this idea of a self-organized learning environment is through an app, and then the app is just for you as the teacher to manage it. For the students, you kind of put a question up here on the app. You could display it on your board or whatever it might be. And then the students will kind of work through at their own pace, and you set parameters for, what kind of things they're supposed to research or where they're supposed to look for sources or how much time they have to do this. And it's actually meant to be just a single 45-minute lesson. And you can sign up for a free account. You can use your Google email to get in there. And there's samples and guides and everything to kind of walk you through it. But they also created a virtual version too for when schools went online in the spring. All of it is freely available. It was started out in Ohio and Western Pennsylvania. And for right now, that's where the bulk of their support is. So that's kind of where they base all their training and everything. But virtual, it actually has its own little almost like Zoom, little web conferencing software, and the questioning and the interface is all built into it. So it's something that you could do virtually as well. And then the ideas of problem-based learning or project-based learning, where you give students that bigger problem, kind of like inquiry-based or a project that they have to work at their own pace and, complete the assignment. And then choice boards are kind of interesting. These became really popular in the elementary levels. But I put this in here as an example for students, and these are digital ones where they're online. Students access them that way, but this is like a bingo board or tic-tac-toe board where there's 9 different assignments in here. And I think the directions for this one was they had to start at number 5, and then tic-tac-toe, they had to pick one on either side. So either 4, 5, or 6, 2, 5, 8, 3, 5, 7, however it was, they had to do, 3 in an order. And that idea of differentiation comes into play with this, definitely, where you're doing different, 1-paragraph summary. So saying start here means you're getting that from every single student. So that's, that might be like your baseline assessment. You want that 1-paragraph summary from every student. And then after that, they're going to go and be a little bit more creative with some other things that they can choose to do. And that does so many things. I mean, for you as a teacher, it might be a lot of work to create all of these different ideas. But for students, definitely increases engagement. They get to choose what it is they want to do. Definitely self-paced because they're going to be working on their own at their own pace and that kind of stuff to complete these things. So just another idea. Again, not something that you're probably going to want to do for every single unit or every single time you're giving an assessment, but just once in a while might be, something. And these, might be a little bit elementary in what they're doing, but the idea of a book trailer is something that kids could do pretty quickly with iMovie, book jacket they could do in Pages or Docs or something like that, comic strips, timelines. So there might be some things that could be useful. And then that way you get that one base thing that you want to get from every single student. And then from there, they have a little bit of voice and choice in what it is that they do. All right, and like we said, some helpful tools to help implement some of these things. I mentioned Edpuzzle already. Nearpod, Marcia, you brought that one up, is another good one. You can basically build an entire self-paced lesson in Nearpod, and students can kind of go through and interact in different ways. You can put slideshows that you already have created. You can put that in there. You can put questioning and quizzes and even 3D manipulatives and all sorts of stuff can kind of go into that Nearpod, and students work at their own pace to get from beginning to end. You also have the option to do teacher paced. So if you're lecturing or giving it in front of a live class like that, students can kind of work through it. And if they're signed into your Nearpod presentation, their iPad screen, like you control the pace of their iPad screen.
Yeah,
So
they can't work ahead. They can't work ahead or go back. They have to. It's called a live lesson. No, you have to.
Yeah.
You control it more. That's the
Mhm.
one I like to use many times, because my question is how do you keep ones from? I don't like to say this. It isn't a nice term to use, but when you go to the zoo, if you ever go to the chimpanzee cage, they pick up their dung and throw it at the wall and see what sticks. And I always use that analogy with the kids. It's not very nice, but it's true that they'll just throw anything at it to see that it sticks and then not do what they're supposed to do. So that's a tough thing with this self-paced thing, which is a lot of times with the Nearpod, I will have a live lesson as opposed to just letting them do it on their own. But I mean, there are merits in what this is doing. And I guess if you can control at least some of it, or say, well, we're only going to do this part today, I guess this is probably, useful that way. I don't know if I could completely let go. I'm sorry, but I could at least try it. So
yeah, and honestly, I can't either. I can't completely let go either. And and something just as a sanity check for teachers, don't, if I go back to wherever that example was. Um, let's see, the choice boards one. You know, anything self-paced, students are going to be doing a lot along the way. For your own sanity, don't grade every single thing. You know, that's going to be way too much. You know, pick and choose. And, you know, in some ways, maybe that, or here, like maybe you're going to grade 2 out of 3. You don't tell the students which 2 or something like that. Or, you know, you're going to take their best 2 or whatever it might be. But for your own sanity, you know, kind of pick and choose and, you know, maybe that unpredictability of, you know, which piece is going to be graded or something like that, a little bit may help the students too with, like you said, Marcia, like you don't want them to just, you know, check the list, it got done. You know, okay, great, but that's not what we were going for. We really want you to learn something here at school. So
you get somebody that goes, well, I'm done now. Well, this is just whatever you threw up there. That's nice, but it isn't what it's supposed to be. So, I mean, I used to do this with the when I had the kids, the freshmen in World Studies, create a game. We do each part of it. So, like, they'd have to start with their idea, and then they'd have to go to writing the instructions. So we'd spend a whole like class and maybe a half of just writing instructions. So it's like you said, Brian, where they have the chance to get feedback and then change what they need to change. But at the same time, it does take a lot of time. Just be aware if you're going to do this, it's going to take some time.
oh yeah, yeah. And the reason why I brought that up was the student survey that went out. A couple of the students said that for, you know, different assignments for some of their teachers, they did the teachers did that feedback where, you know, they gave them an assignment in the task list for Monday. It was due on Wednesday, and then they provided feedback, and then they were able to correct it or, you know, make changes to improve it for, you know, a couple extra points or whatever by Sunday. It was kind of structured and laid out that way. And the student said that, you know, for them, it helped because they got to see what they did wrong and make those changes to make it right. They felt that they learned a little bit better that way. So I just thought it was something interesting that I would share. That's all.
Right. And not just that, but it also gives them a chance. They feel like, oh, I can get a better grade, which is true because you have to kind of give them that chance to redeem themselves. I mean, that's the way I always looked at those long-term type of projects, because this way it ends up in the end being easier for me to grade because they got it right because they went back and did the work.
Yep. Yeah. And you don't want to have to read, you know, 200 mediocre essays where you could read 200 pretty good essays. You know, it makes it a lot easier to grade in that way. And some other tools like Socrative or Kahoot for quizzes are available on the iPad. Pretty easy to create, just short quizzes with that. All the Google tools, if you haven't been with us yet, you know, we have all the videos are up on YouTube. I went through quite a few of them, different ways that they can be used. And then Quizzes and Quizlet are 2 different tools. Quizzes is another quiz kind of tool like Socrative or Kahoot. Quizlet has been around for a long time. That's the one that's more like the digital flashcards, but then the program turns them into like review games and things like that for the students as well. And these are the kinds of things that, like with Quizlet, you can create or you can have the students create. You know, you don't have to do all the work just for that. And then other ones like VoiceThread allow students to take a presentation like this one and then include their voice and do like a voiceover or a narration. So for, you know, creating like a screencast or, you know, a presentation like that, they can do that. And then Vocaroo is kind of a little interesting tool. It's very simple. Let's see if I can pull it up here. Just an online voice recorder. And like I said, very simple. You have a record and a stop record button. And what happens is when you click record and you have to allow it to use your microphone, it will start recording everything you're saying, and then you can pause it or you can stop it. And then when you stop it, it will save the voice recording as an MP3. So then you can take that MP3 and you can put it in a slideshow, or you can put it in a PowerPoint or something like that. So as a teacher, you know, you might have your your slideshow here that you want to share with your students, you could quickly add some voice notes with Vocaroo, and then insert that audio, and then the students could listen to that. So, you know, a slide like this, I might have a couple bullet points here, but then I might record what it is I'm saying. And for me, it's a lot easier to just talk and put it out there than it is to type that whole big long thing. You know, and then they could just click play, or you can have it play automatically. So I thought I'd throw that one in there because it's a good one. And Bob, since you're on, that might be good for Spanish too, for language practice.
Yeah.
Okay. But I think that is, yep, that's all I have for this. Like I said, it's just kind of a basic overview, some ideas and some thoughts that I just wanted to put out there, and, you know, take or leave what works for you.